Guys, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by and taking your time. You are awesome. You were so kind to write me personal messages asking where I am, if everything is fine. You bought me coffees and supported this channel, which is amazing. I want to thank you for supporting this channel. Today, I would like to speak about my home studio setup, and I find it super interesting. Why? Because I was asked many times, like, why I do have this kind of setup, and I think that this is now the perfect time to speak about it. So I made this picture of my setup, and I will go through from the left side to the right side, explaining what I do have, what I use, what I would do different if I would start all over again, or if I would build a new home studio. And yeah, I will speak, of course, about why this setup is unusual, because I never saw it before. Never. I was in many studios. I saw many pictures of different home studios, and everything looks the same all the time, which I had as well. Like I used to be in a more or less normal setup for many years, and at some point, because I've moved so many times in my life from to different cities, different countries, I had to come up with a concept that was working for me, because before that it wasn't working for me. Where I was like happy with the setup. So let's start. On the left side, we have this panels, acoustic panels. This is important if you want to, like, let's say you have a room, you are not under the roof, so you have all the time like parallel walls, the ceiling, the ground, the walls, everything is in parallel. You will have echoes. If you clap into the hands, you will have echoes. The same happens if you turn up your speakers to some degree. You will have issues with echoes. So what does it mean? That you hear the sound waves that are coming out of your speaker, and those sound waves that travel through the room, they travel to the wall, to the ceiling, to the ground, and at some point they will come back to your ear. And if you have too much reverberation in the room, too much of those echoes, it will first of all, it will not sound good at all. So not like in a perfect treated room, in a perfect treated studio setup. And second, it means as well that the not it's like sounding not good enough, but or false. It means that you will not hear the sound as actually the sound is. So it means that the sound waves are canceling each other out. You will have issues, and this is why we use a lot of times headphones, so we are not like only have one reference and the reference of the room. If you have a perfect treated room, of course, you don't have to use a lot of headphones throughout the production. But most of us, most of the people who are living in flats, right, or like when you have neighbors all around you, you will have, of course, issues when you start to listen to music very loud. Important here as well to mention is that those acoustic panels, they only reduce those types of echoes in the higher end of the frequency spectrum. So the mid frequencies, let's say like 1000 to 8000 kilohertz, maybe a little bit less, and the bottom end, which is super important, this is not what will reduce the reverberation of those frequencies. So you have to treat those frequencies with totally different panels, and you have to set up the room in a way that those frequencies can travel through the room without having a lot of issues in the frequency spectrum, how you perceive the sound. Okay, this is the first thing. So I don't have a subwoofer. The reasons I said, flat, then so the neighbors. It would be nice actually to have this option, because most of us, we just fight with those low frequencies. We want to figure out, is our low end right? Is it too much? Is it too less? Sometimes we just don't hear it because the speakers are too small. This is why we need bigger speaker, right? However, it doesn't mean we can't solve it. So, for example, I will talk about it now. So, if you have the option to use another speaker that is, for example, a little bit more low end focused, even if it's like a small speaker, so not a big subwoofer, but you know that the frequency spectrum of the speaker is more low frequency focused, you can pretty fast figure out, if you listen to tracks, if you listen to music, if you compare it, how they sound on those speakers. This is the most important thing. So saying that the subwoofer is important to have in a home studio setup is not, I wouldn't say it's correct. So you will definitely be able to make great productions, even with great low end, if you listen to speakers that you do have, compare the tracks between all those speakers, and at some point you will know exactly at what volume you have to listen to those speakers, where you have to be in the room as well. If you run around, if you are here, so in front of your speaker screen, etc., you will at some point figure out where those frequencies are balanced out. And this is why, for me, it's much more important than saying, okay, now I have the best speakers that I can buy or afford, right? I have a subwoofer, I have this and that. Still, there are many people, they still fight with those setups because they don't know what they have to do in order how their tracks should sound better. And this is what I said before. You have to compare a lot of times, you have to run around and figure out at what point the speaker is basically fighting with those frequencies and the power of those frequencies. And if you figure out this point and you know, okay, this is the point, now you know that beyond this, it doesn't make any sense. So you have to balance out your tracks against other tracks, so they, are perfect. How your speakers that you do have perceive and give the sound waves back. Okay, so this is to the speakers, but I want to speak about first the fader port. I don't use it to like open up the session and control the session. This is not why I have this fader port from PreSonus. I use it to automate my tracks, so automate effects or automate the volume of the tracks. This is the primary reason why I do have this fader port, because of course you can do it with a mouse. You can paint all those different curves, etc. Here and there, of course, I do it, but sometimes you feel that you can't do it with the mouse. Why? Because you want to feel the track, you want to feel the instrument that you want to automate, and this is why I think those types of fader ports in this case is a beautiful compensation to the possibilities that we have with our mouse or with knobs that we can turn, etc. Okay, Okay, now let's talk about the speaker setup, because this is the most unusual thing here in the home studio. So I have two speakers. The first speaker is a Grot box from Sonic, kind of a radio box. And the right speaker, this is now behind the camera, is the iLoud MTM. Before that, I had two Case 5, the first generation, which was the perfect point to start, because it was now like more than 10 years ago. At some point, because I moved so much, I understood that it doesn't make any sense for me to use those two boxes anymore, speakers. Why? Because most of the time, and here as well in this flat, you are not, you don't sit in the middle of the room, meaning that you don't have the perfect space on the left side and the perfect space on the right side. So as you see on this picture, the table and the setup is on the left side of the room. Right side we have the door, and behind me is everything else. So this is the issue. The issue is that if you place those two exact speakers, you will realize that one speaker is in the corner, the other is more or less in the middle of the room, and one speaker is louder or quieter, depending on how you see it, how you perceive it, meaning that the panorama already is not correct. What you do is you go behind the speaker and start to turn it down or up, so they are more or less balanced. Yes, this is what I did for many, many years. But at some point, you realize when you think about acoustics, you know that one speaker is on the in the corner and the other is in the middle of the room, meaning the other speaker that is in the middle of the room has more space to give those sound frequencies to your right ear, in this case, and the left speaker does represent other frequencies because of those bouncing frequencies from behind the wall, the ceiling, etc. You will perceive still those sound waves different on the right and left side. And then I thought, okay, what is like my working setup for most of the time? And most of the time I mix in mono and check the stereo with my two headphones back and forth. So one open headphone and one closed. And then I thought, okay, what would be if I just have one Grot box and one speaker that is as well like this mono speaker? What will happen to my overall production process? I don't know. So I started to try it out. I sold the speakers, the Case, and bought this MTM instead. Why? Because the MTM is built this way that it has a processor. When you place not this microphone, but another microphone that comes with this MTM, you place it where your ears are, so in the middle of your head, right? And you sweep the room. So the speaker does it itself. And it flattens out how the speaker gives out the sound back, the frequencies back. Why? Because every room is different. The frequencies are different in the room because of the different cancellations of the sound waves against each other, etc., etc. So I knew it's a great just speaker to try it out because first of all it had great ratings, small enough, right? I don't need like super low frequencies even though the speaker is amazing until like 60, 50 hertz. Definitely, it's amazing, and still super clean. So I personally, this is not like, again, nobody paid me to say this is great, buy it or whatnot. But I never heard a speaker in this setup that is so clean in the sound. Never. It's not possible, because the speaker gives me exactly the frequencies back that are missing because of my room. So it's, I mean, the technology is of course better and better from one year to the next. So yeah, I know that the Care Case, the fourth generation, they do some sort of the same thing with a processing inside. So yeah, but this is my personal opinion about this MTM. Do you understand the setup? So one speaker that is mono, the other is as well mono, and everything else in between. I don't need to sit and try to balance out the panorama, the instruments, the sounds in the panorama field, because I use most of the time my headphones for that. And I never had the situation where I think the panorama is a little bit like strange or in this direction. Why? Because one headphone is open, meaning that the panorama is already different. Two, if you have another headphone that is closed. So it's a big difference. And this is why I stayed with the setup, and everyone who was visiting me here, they were standing and asking me, huh, what is it? Never saw this type of setup. And then I explained what I have explained to you now. And most of the guys said, it makes sense actually, because you are sitting not in the middle of the room, because you can't. Why not trying out this type of setup? So if you have the same situation, try it out. One speaker rod box. So you have this speaker that is focusing on the important frequencies from let's say like 150 hertz to 5 kilohertz, something like that, 7 maybe. Of course, it goes a little bit higher, but how you perceive. So you perceive the middle, the mid frequencies, and one speaker that is perfect in the high end, perfect in the low end until what the speaker can actually represent still. And if you still have any troubles with the low end, I said it before, try to use as well other speakers or the speakers that you have, and go until the point where you feel that the low end is now, or a speaker starts to saturate the sound, can't really represent clearly the sound, and stay with this volume all the time, because it's the perfect point where you can balance out your track against your reference tracks. Cool. This is for the speakers. I have to look at the time. Okay, 90 minutes. The headphones, already mentioned it a couple of times. Doesn't really matter what headphone you have. The important thing here is, if you can afford to have two and one is open, one is closed, it's a great comparison between, you know, the panorama, how you perceive the sound. If you say, okay, I'm not into it, or I have a perfect setup with my speakers, just buy a more expensive headphone and you will be fine as well. The acoustics below the boxes here, called Auralex, it's more or less for lower frequencies, so the table is not vibrating all the time. The same I did actually for my HDDs. I don't know why I did it only like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it helped because if the HDDs, now I have HDDs, I want to go to SSD, but they just cost so much money. But if you have the same setup with HDDs standing on the table, try to isolate them from the table so they are not vibrating with the frequencies that they represent. In this case, it's 120 hertz. So every time the swell here with YouTube or another setup where I just record sounds, I have to reduce 120 because of those HDDs. This is the downside of using HDDs. Okay, the next is the computer. I have a maxed out version, almost maxed out version iMac from 2017. I have 40 gigs of RAM. Everything else is maxed out. I had no money left at that time to max it out to 64. And I wanted to try out if I actually have to max it out. I had, I think, 2 or 3 projects where it was, really close to like 3 or 4 gigabytes left for the RAM, so for the sound libraries. I don't see any project in the next like weeks where I will have those super big libraries where I have to load them, and the whole session is already 36 gigs because the system takes 4 gigabytes away. The DW takes sometimes 1 to 2 gigs away, but I think even like 30 gigs, it's a lot. It's a lot because most of the time I work with 6 gigabytes on my old MacBook, and I still had a lot of bigger projects. And if you see, okay, I don't have a lot of gigs left, you just print the tracks, load another library, rearrange where you say, okay, I'm fine with the arrangement, again, print, load back another library, back and forth. It's not perfect, but it works. So at some point you will understand what you have to do in order to make those bigger sessions with less, just a smaller computer, I would say. Okay, down below we have a Lindy USB port. I'm fine with it. It has 7 inputs for USB sticks or for the HDDs. The keyboard is there. Perfect. Runs, never had like any issues. Then I have Octava mics for sound design if I have to record something. Great mics. And we have the Focusrite Scarlett 18 i20. I bought it because I wanted to have, because I had those boxes, the speakers, I wanted to have multiple outputs, because the less the interface is, the less you have the outputs that you can use. Of course, the inputs as well. Inputs, I don't use all the inputs. I have 8 inputs to record with the XLR cables or the line cables, but I don't use them. But I wanted to have more outputs. So if I would do something different today, if I would build it up again, I definitely would stay away with this interface because I don't need it. Actually, I would just buy, for example, 2 or 4 inputs. And instead, because it's of course less money, you pay for the inputs most of the time. Then I would just take the rest of the money and buy a monitor controller. And if you compare the prices between this interface and the smaller interface with the monitor controller, you will have yeah, more or less the same price. So yeah, at that time, I think there was not a monitor controller that I liked, but now we have like Presonus again. We have now the big knob. So there are definitely some cool controllers. So yeah, for like 500 euros bucks, you can have smaller interface and a monitor controller. Okay, and the last is the MPK 2025, 225, so 2 octaves from Akai. It's just a keyboard with 2 octaves, pads, knobs. You can do a lot of things. I started to play the piano. I had a bigger keyboard actually, but now I don't have the space to use it. If you know how to arrange, you can definitely do a lot of with 2 octaves. I don't need more because of the space, and this is what I actually wanted to say in the beginning, but I forgot. I like to have a setup for me where I'm not overwhelmed by how much stuff I have in front of me, because sometimes you sit here, you sit at your home studio, you want to focus, you want to make sure that you are doing the right things at the right time. But if you have a lot of stuff around you, you can be, yeah, sometimes overwhelmed, and you are not focused to, yeah, to do the production, to do the music, whatever you have to do. And this is why I like to have this clean setup. Not a lot of things in front of me, and especially because I have a allergy on dust. I want to have the option just to take the things in 1 minute off the table, clean everything up, put it back, and I'm fine. So I don't have the allergy. 28 minutes, one take. Guys, if you have any questions, ask. If you have anything to add, add. If you want to support this channel, support. If you want to give a like, give a like. You know the game. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you again for your support, and I will see you in the next video, guys. Peace. I forgot something. I have to mention it. The beginning was about acoustics. Above me, I will show you the picture. I have a acoustic panel that I built myself some years ago. I put two of the panels together because I lived at my parents' house under the roof, and if you are under the roof, you don't have any of those echoes most of the time. Here and there at some points of the room, yes, but where I was sitting behind the table, everything was fine. So I didn't have this acoustic panel. But if you have parallel walls and ceilings and whatnot, it's pretty easy actually to install it. Unfortunately, when I build it, because I wasn't doing YouTube, otherwise I would record how to build them. It takes, maybe I would say, in the beginning, I would say like maybe 2 days, something like that. So maybe 12, 14 hours to come up with the concept. And I'm just super happy because it works. Otherwise, I would have those issues when I play the music back or clap or speak. I will definitely hear that the room is not treated, at least at this space, properly. So the sound is not representing the frequencies that how they should be actually when you, for example, hear them with the headphones or in a perfect treated room, in a perfect treated studio. And because I visited a lot of studios, I worked in studios, especially in the study time, you can't compare it with your home and with those expensive studio setups. So make sure whatever you do it on purpose because of the reasons, not just place something somewhere. Make sure to really take your time understanding how your room sounds and figure out what is the best way, because sometimes even like 10 centimeters here or here, how you place those things can definitely make a difference. So work with your room. This is what I would say for a home studio setup. Definitely try to analyze your room. Where are like areas in your room, especially if you round around and hear your music back and other productions? Where is the perfect a spot where you can hear the low end really, really good and clean? Because most of the time, actually, especially here, I don't hear any low end, a lot of low end. I have to go stand up and go somewhere to hear the low end better. And those types of things as well, higher frequencies, etc. So just make sure to learn your room, and if you know how your room sounds, don't as well like move a lot of things around the room, like I don't know, whatever you have in your room, right? So make sure that it definitely stays as long it is. And if you change something, again, try to understand what actually happened to your acoustics. Of course, the best, as I said, the best way is when you are in the middle of the walls, right? So the right space, the same space on the left, and the same space on the right. It will be the best setup. How we actually know the studios that are out there. But for example, here with my setup, I know there are many people out there, they do have similar things where they're sitting more to the left or to the right of the room. You have to figure out what works best for you, and it takes a little bit of time. Okay? That's it. I will see you in the next video, guys. Bye. Swag on overload, boy. Swag on overload, boy. Swag on overload, boy. Swag on overload, boy.